You're listening to the Jefferson Exchange. I'm Mike Green. For the past quarter century, millions of acres of America's national forests have been protected from logging and road building by what is known as the Roadless Rule. Last year, the Trump administration took aim at the protective policy. Oregon Representative Andrea Salinas is one of the leading voices in the effort to protect the forests by preserving the Roadless Rule. We interviewed her in September of 2025 as an earlier comment period was coming to a close. This month, on August 18, 2026, Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins announced that the U.S. Forest Service has filed a proposed rule to rescind in its entirety the National 2001 Roadless Area Conservation Rule. A new public comment period has been established from now until September 21, 2026. Here's the exchange we had with Representative Andrea Salinas and Haleigh Martin, the communications manager for KS Wild. Welcome to the Jefferson Exchange, Representative Salinas.
Thank you, Mike. I'm pleased to be here.
Also joining us is Haleigh Martin, communications manager for KS Wild in Ashland.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, Haleigh. I should note that we also invited the Forest Service into this conversation. It declined to join us, but it provided a written response, which we have posted on our website at jeffexchange.org. So, Representative Salinas, help us understand this political battle, please.
Yeah, so under the Clinton administration, as I understand it, President Clinton decided to put into executive order this ruling that basically said that, people cannot go into our old forest, old growth areas without reason to build roads and to extract and to mine and to harvest timber, because it's a threat. It's a threat to the untouched wild forest lands, the wetlands, the habitat, and to the indigenous people who actually live off the land. But it was an executive order. And what has been happening is, when a Republican takes control, like President Trump, he reversed this order. And then President Biden put it back in place. It basically said no more roads to be built to get into these areas. Well, now we're back with President Trump again. And so he, as you just said, Brooke Rollins decided, and President Trump decided to reverse this executive order that basically says no road construction in these protected forest lands. So what we have decided, myself and Senator Cantwell on the Senate side, we have come together and decided to put in place a bill that would put an end to this back and forth ping-ponging effect. And it's called the Roadless Area Conservation Rule. And it would basically say you cannot repeal this any longer. You cannot build roads unless public health and the health and life of the community is at stake. So, and it's a very common sense approach, and it's what the Roadless Rule and executive order had always said.
Okay, so Congress will exercise its authority.
That's right. Yes, when we have control over the House and Senate.
Haleigh, you published a commentary on the KS Wild website titled, "Rolling Back the Roadless Rule Could Open Up Some of the Nation's Last Remaining Wild Landscapes for Exploitation." What do you mean by exploitation?
Exploitation, I think, means different things in different parts of the country. I will say that KS Wild is a public lands advocate for the region of Southern Oregon and Northern California. So I can speak to our region here. Exploitation looks mostly like logging. It also looks like mining and just general road building, which does fragment our wildlands that a lot of people in this area of Southern Oregon and Northern California and those who visit really appreciate and value about this region.
So what does KS Wild do?
Well, KS Wild is a public lands watchdog organization, essentially. So what we do is we have some folks on staff who kind of monitor these 8 million acres of public lands across Southern Oregon and Northern California. And we keep an eye on the projects that the public lands managers are proposing. So in our case here in this region, it's mostly the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. And that comes mostly in the way of logging, as well as mining, other projects that might threaten clean water, clean air, etc. So a lot of our work though is in forest defense because we have such amazing vast forest land across this region. And so we really work to keep an eye on the agencies. We work to hold them accountable. We work to kind of engage and excite the public about their public lands so they feel empowered to speak up, to take action when the comment periods come up, to, show up to town halls and really just appreciate all of these amazing wildlands that we have around us, many of which the Roadless Rule acts to protect.
My guests are Congresswoman Andrea Salinas from Oregon's 6th District and Haleigh Martin, the communications manager at KS Wild in Ashland. Representative Salinas, this issue appears to me to be part of the larger capitalist conundrum of conservation versus development. And where do we draw the line between the two, I think, is the problem. Is it possible to find agreement on this issue among 535 members of Congress?
Well, I don't think we are going to get complete agreement on this, but the last time we saw the reversal of the roadless rule, we saw over 1.5 million people across the United States respond to the request for comments. This is the largest comment period and largest response to a rule that we've ever seen. So there is certainly public interest in this. And I think where a lot of folks come at this from is, our undeveloped forest lands and old growth forests it's one of our most effective and important tools in fighting against climate change. So it doesn't just have to be somebody who, like us here in Oregon, we're so lucky that we have all these beautiful and pristine forests to go hike and recreate in. It's not just about that, right? It is about this immense way to sequester so for instance, 10 million metric tons of carbon dioxide every year. That's like the equivalent of taking about 2 million passenger vehicles off the road every year. And so, under the Trump administration, he's trying to get rid of any kind of rebate or support to buy electric vehicles, which we know are lower in carbon. This is a great way to address our climate conundrum right now. So no, we are certainly not going to get all 535 of us. All I need, though, is enough members of Congress to agree that this is an extraction. It's a way to extract. It's a way to extract resources. And I don't think the return on that investment is worth the equivalent of putting 2 million passenger vehicles back on the road and harming our climate goals even further. So that's really what we're dealing with here is what is that return on the investment? It's going to go to big billionaires that already line the pockets of Trump and, I would assume other members of Congress, not mine necessarily, but this is kind of the conundrum that we're talking about here.
When we talk about climate change, we're talking about an administration that doesn't respect that. It doesn't respect the environment. It has conducted mass firings of personnel that are used to battle wildfires because of the climate change. It's reduced funding for research. It's reduced funding to support programs. They have an agenda that they're executing. I'm not sure what it is. Do you know what it is?
Oh, I wish I knew what the end game plan was here. I consistently say, and I appreciate you asking this question. I consistently say I am always willing to work with anybody who wants to reach across and and engage in this conversation. But when I don't know what your end game plan is here, it's really hard to navigate. And to your point, Mike, what this administration has been doing is completely denying science. They will not look at the science. They will not look at common sense solutions like, oh, if this community is actually at threat of a wildfire, yes, we can get in and actually address that. If we need to, do some thinning in this area to do some kind of, wildfire prevention, we can do that. There's nothing common sense right now about this administration or my Republican colleagues who are helping this administration. It's all about Trump's bottom line, his personal bottom line. And everything, as people know, he is very transactional. This is about Trump, I believe, trying to line his own pockets by opening up these areas to mining and to exploitation, essentially.
Well, we have representatives here on the Republican side in Oregon. Who do they represent?
So we have one, and as you know, my colleague Cliff Bentz represents the eastern side of the state, and he does represent some federal lands as well. But this is not, I would say, this is not what Oregonians want, and I believe that the majority of Oregonians understand that the rule that we have in place is common sense. I haven't heard, and I am the ranking member, which means, if we were in charge, I would be the chair of the forestry subcommittee on the House Agriculture Committee. And so I do work with our timber industry, and I have not heard from them that they actually want this rule repealed. So, I just came back from the Tongass National Forest, where I've learned that, British Columbia is already doing some mining on their side of the pristine wilderness areas. I believe Trump wants to open up our side, the Alaska side, to similar mining and extraction. And I think that is really what kind of the big boondoggle is here.
And so, does our Republican Party here in Oregon agree with the president or agree with you?
That's a good question. You would have to ask Cliff Bentz. I know Cliff on a personal level, Congressman Bentz, somewhat personal level, and I know his family does have some mining interests. So I would probably say that he would probably be favorable to repealing the roadless rule.
Okay.
But that's a guess. So I've not asked him directly.
So, Haleigh, the Wilderness Society conducted a study of the impact of roads on forest wildfires. It wrote, quote, "Roads play an important role in managing fire on the national forests, but roads also are known to increase ignition frequency and damage ecosystems," end quote. Now, the data that they show at the Wilderness Society suggests that the highest wildfire ignition frequency was within 50 meters of roads. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the data shows what it shows, and it's hard to refute science. As much as this administration tries, I think Representative Salinas said it really well earlier. This administration is putting major energy into straying away from science and factual information to further their own profit. And I think that that study and other studies that have been done that are similar to it are really telling to what the truth is. And I think this is the information we need to get out to people and share with people, because I think the administration's putting a lot of effort into redirecting away from that science. And I think if we follow science, we follow the professionals, the fire ecologists, the biologists, the people who have studied topics like wildfire in particular and forest ecology for their entire careers, we would see that it isn't so simple as just building more roads to mitigate fire. And I think they warned that in that roads can lead to more wildfire. Secretary Rollins had mentioned, the Forest Service had mentioned that they need to build roads in order to get in and fight fire. And I think that it's important to note that the Forest Service is already responsible for managing over 380,000 miles of roads, which is more than our US highway system. Kind of a striking fact. So all of those roads do already exist. They get into places that the wildland firefighters or folks might need to get into to fight fire. So many of those roads already exist. And the roadless rule does also have exceptions. It includes exceptions for emergencies like wildfire. So that includes road building. If there was a wildfire risk, a quick road can be busted into the forest to take care of that. But more importantly, I think Representative Salinas hit on it a little bit earlier, that there are other routes to managing the forest that aren't just building more roads to fight fire. I think in our region here and across the nation, we really have to learn how to work with fire. We have to listen to our Indigenous community members. Controlled burns, cultural burns, thinning to reduce the risk of wildfire in those really dense stands of forest. That's really where we need to put our energy. We need to start there and care for our forest land rather than try to be in this reactive state. And I think that the longevity of our forests and our communities that live in that wildland urban interface area will survive a lot longer.
Well, it sounds like there's some suggestion that building roads into these protected forests is a pretext for something else, not just taking care of the forests. But we have to take a short break. We'll be right back with my guest, Congresswoman Andrea Salinas from Oregon's 6th District, and Haleigh Martin from KS Wild here in Ashland. I'm Mike Green. We also invited the Forest Service into this conversation. It declined to join us, but it provided a written response, which we have posted on our website at jeffexchange.org. Now, before the break, we were talking about the rationale behind the push to build roads into these protected national lands. And there seems to be some suggestion that it's a pretext to something else. Representative Salinas, last month, the USDA published on its website the following statement, quote, "The proposal aligns with President Trump's Executive Order 14192, Unleashing Prosperity Through Deregulation," end quote. My question to you is the root of this political battle over roads and forests a philosophical and strategic argument over how best to protect the forest from wildfire, or more simply, a pursuit of profit for a small population of land developers?
Oh, I think it was made pretty clear in that executive order. This is about profit. And what's so sad is that the Trump administration is trying to ram through a proposal to benefit large extractive industries and their bottom line at the expense of people and populations who are currently actually utilizing these pristine lands in terms of native communities who hunt and fish and need the deer and salmon habitats for their own subsistence, conservation, recreationists. There is actually economic activity that takes place on these lands. So if he really wanted to make sure that these lands had the economic benefit that they deserve, he would actually be hiring, not firing, people in the Forest Service to take care of those lands. So to Haleigh's previous point before the break, this is kind of the bane of my existence right now. I'm so incensed that this administration, when the West and even, southern states are seeing wildfires the way they are, we could be doing so much more to clean up the forest floor, to do thinning, to make sure that we have, culturally and prescribed burns that benefit the health of our forests, the surrounding communities, the native communities that use these lands, conservationists, recreationists, and it would improve people's health and also expand economic activity. That's not happening, and everybody should know that right now, because there is this false idea that he is just doing wonders for our forest right now, and he's doing quite the opposite.
Well, when the federal government takes away the funds needed to do the work, it creates an added burden on the state of Oregon. And we already had to have a special session to pay for wildfires. So how are we going to cover the costs of taking care of the forest, taking care of the wildfire seasons, when the federal government has abdicated its responsibility and now it's trying to build more roads, which cause more fires?
That's right. You just hit the bigger and more complex situation that we're in right now, which is why I'm so upset over Trump's. He doesn't have a plan. He does not have a plan around this, except for, oh, let's give this friend, let's give this mining friend a chance to make billions of dollars. Let's give this forest group a chance to make billions of dollars. There isn't really anything about public or community safety in what he is doing right now. And it's frightening because, as you mentioned, right, Oregon is in a place right now where the tariffs have hit us hard, our revenues are declining, and we're seeing these cuts at the federal level in terms of our Forest Service. And if we were to see wildfires like we saw last year, where I think it was 1.5 million acres, our largest burns ever in terms of acreage in Oregon, we would be in a world of hurt. And then not to mention that he's hurting our geopolitical relationships. So people come from Mexico, from Canada to help on these wildland fires. I don't know that we're going to have the same type of help if we were to see something catastrophic happen in the West. And then, as you may have heard, I had a constituent who was detained, who was on the Bear Gulch fire up in Washington just last week. We cannot continue to harm the work that is being done by wildland firefighters when they're protecting communities and people, because Trump's idea of what safety looks like is detention of hardworking people.
It sounds to me like we really need to get past the euphemisms, the abstract, and get more specific around who these organizations are and the names of actual people that are pushing for an end to the roadless rule.
Haleigh, do you want to take this? Because I rely on groups like Haleigh's to help us figure out, yes, who these groups are. So I agree with you, Mike. I do think we need to know.
That is a really big question. I think right now we're seeing kind of an exacerbation of what we saw in the first Trump administration. And I don't mean to point all fingers at the Trump administration, but I think that's kind of where we're at right now. I think that Representative Salinas said it earlier. The Trump administration and Trump himself have very specific motives to make money. And the timber industry, the folks, the organizations or the businesses that are working to mine our public lands, to log our public lands, those are the people that it's a huge industry, and they return a lot of that money to Trump's pockets when he is able to give them what they want. So I think that the individuals themselves, I do not know any names off the top of my head, but I think I can point very generally to the Trump administration and many of the folks on his side who are, just looking to make money at the cost of, all of our public lands, our wildlife, our enjoyment, recreation, drinking water, functioning ecosystems. I think that we are the people who lose in this situation. And these, the billionaires, the very rich, the hyper wealthy are the ones that win time and time again.
My guests are Congresswoman Andrea Salinas from Oregon's 6th District and Haleigh Martin from KSWOW here in Ashland. So Haleigh, what are you hearing locally? Who are the organizations and people in this region that are in support of rescinding the roadless rule?
Well, it's kind of all over the place because, more broadly, the roadless rule protects a whole wide swath of lands. And we're even seeing like a little bit of bipartisan support for the roadless rule, because you do have communities like anglers, hunters, other outdoors people who may traditionally fall on that more conservative side of the spectrum that are also in support of defending the roadless rule, because it does protect the resources that they also get to enjoy. I think when we think of stuff like this conservation movement, a lot of people think about the hippies and the tree huggers and the folks like chaining themselves to the trees to protect the wildlands, but it's much more broad than that. And I think that it's more of a bipartisan issue than what we might originally expect or assume. And like Representative Salinas said earlier, when the first comment period happened in the late 90s to codify the roadless rule, 1.6 million people spoke up to protect their public lands through the roadless rule. And that's a huge number. And I think that this time around, we're still seeing a lot of support from a wide range of community members in the area who want to protect these public lands. I think I look directly at my representative, Cliff Bentz, who is responsible for a big part of Oregon, representing a big part of Oregon. And I will say to his credit, he did come out and say he didn't support the One Big Beautiful Bill. And I think that was to kind of hold up his hunters and his anglers and the folks in his community that he was trying to represent. But I look directly at Cliff Bentz in this regard, to kind of stand up for this, to not only stand up for those community members, but all of his community members that realistically, I mean, we're not the ones making the money in this situation, but we're the ones losing a lot of access, a lot of public safety, a lot of our drinking water. So I would look mostly to Cliff Bentz, to be honest with you.
Well, you both mentioned the public comment period. And Representative Salinas, what's the point of the public comment? Who reads them? And what influence do they have in a decision that is apparently already a done deal?
I know it feels like a foregone conclusion, and I recognize that, and I'm sure your listeners are thinking, why in the world would I do this given, Trump's pretty hell-bent on ramming this thing through. And so it is the agency that looks at this. But I will say we need numbers. And so I am urging the public to submit comments to the USDA in opposition to the proposed rollback. I think it is so important, even when there are people on maybe the other side of the aisle or in the White House right now, and we know that the Trump administration does not listen to a lot of us. It is still important to have our voices and to have our ideas on the record. And if not for right now and for decisions that are being made right now, then for posterity, for legal challenges, because this is critical, right? And to Haleigh's point about drinking water, this could actually, so for local jurisdictions, counties, cities who have to make sure that they deliver clean drinking water systems, it can threaten it. When there's runoff and erosion, it can lead to more pollutants and sediment in the water. This will raise costs for water treatment. So everybody should be so concerned about this and should be submitting public comment.
Well, I hear the passion and urgency in your voice. You and a coalition of Western states members of Congress want to pass the Roadless Area Conservation Act of 2025. Under this administration, is that realistic?
Well, we will need, as you alluded to earlier, we will need Republican support. And so I don't ever introduce a bill without trying to get that support. And so we tried pre-introduction. I was not successful, but it doesn't mean I will stop. So we obviously need Republicans right now. They have control of Congress and the White House. And even when Democrats take control, I still want to make sure that Republicans' voices are heard when we try to move this bill through. And so, again, it's bicameral, and I hope to have this bipartisan even when Democrats control Congress.
In closing thoughts, I want to say this. The end of the roadless protections could potentially involve the Oregon Department of Transportation, given that new roads might be built into forested lands. And wildfire fighters will likely need to become familiar with the new roads. But we've witnessed massive funding cuts and layoffs at ODOT and among our wildfire fighting personnel. Your closing thoughts?
So you can't see me right now. I'm just holding my temples. This could be disastrous. It could be the perfect storm of hazard. And for those who went through the Labor Day fires, 2020, and the fires since then, we know things are getting worse, right? We can read the science and know that that's true, but we could also live it. And there are too many people in these ravaged communities that cannot handle another year like that we just can't. And so I think that's the most compelling statement for people who are submitting public comments, that we are not in a position to address this, not from a fiscal standpoint, not from an ecological standpoint. And we have to make sure that, that the roadless rule stays intact.
Well, appreciate that. About 30 seconds. Haleigh, your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the final point that I'd like to make is that once it's gone, it's gone. On behalf of public lands, once it's gone, it's gone. And I think that it's such an important time right now when so many of us feel, quite honestly, relatively hopeless. Finding routes of action is the easiest way to feel like you are engaging in the good side of history and around this issue. So submitting your comments, staying active, and getting out and enjoying your public lands to reconnect with these places and remind yourself why you want to fight for them. And speaking to a lot of my community members here in Southern Oregon and Northern California, we love our public lands. We love the places that we get to escape to reconnect with nature. So now's the time to fight, and we have to do it now before it's gone.
Well, thank you both for the work that you both do, and thank you both for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
My guests were Congresswoman Andrea Salinas from Oregon's 6th District and Haleigh Martin from KS Wild in Ashland. I'm Mike Green. You've been listening to a replay of an exchange with Oregon Representative Andrea Salinas and Haleigh Martin of KS Wild about the Trump administration's effort to rescind the roadless rule that protects millions of acres of forest lands. A new public comment period is now open until September 21st, 2026. A link to the federal government's public comments section can be found in the Roadless Rule story we posted on our website at jeffexchange.org. It's titled the long and winding forestry question: roads or no roads?